London is famously known for its immense fleet of red double-decker buses. But what about Paris? Did the City of Lights ever have transport buses with an upper level? Well, they did. And the last double-decker bus they had is the reason why there aren't any today. This is the story of the Berliet PCMR-E, the bus that was made mainly to save face. Hi, this is Jeffrey. Now, as we all know, London is famous for its huge fleet of red double-decker buses. Now, what about Paris? Did Paris ever have double-deckers? And the answer to that question is yes, they did. Now, in the early part of the 20th century, Paris did have a fleet of double-decker buses, but then they sort of disappeared. Now, in the mid-1960s, Paris tried again with double-deckers, and what they received was quite interesting. It was a bus designed by a famous French designer, and only 26 were built. However, the bus was seen as a face-saving measure for its manufacturer. And it's an interesting story. So, let's get started in learning about the PCMR-E, Paris's double-decker bus of the 1960s. Ever wonder why Paris, France does not have double-decker transport buses like London? Paris's RATP once operated a small fleet of double-decker buses for almost a decade, but ultimately it did not convince authorities to continue with this style of bus, and it remained a footnote in the history of transport in the City of Lights. Paris did have some double-deckers since the 1950s, but they were designed specifically for tourist use. The Citirama Citroën U55 was, for good reason, the most well-known and fascinating of all the tourist buses in Paris. In the 1960s, traffic was already a difficult situation in Paris, and the French capital was congested with automobiles, delivery trucks, and RATP buses. To try to reduce the number of buses while increasing transport capacity, the RATP decided to carry out an experiment using the example of London-style double-decker buses, with perhaps an inspiration from the Berliet Schneider P2s that roamed the capital until 1912. A request for proposals by RATP to vehicle manufacturers was issued in the mid-1960s to produce a small fleet of double-decker buses. Berliet responded to this request by producing, in 1966, a double-deck prototype based on the PCM-type bus in its shortened version, which was known as the PGR, and the new bi-level model was known as the PCMR-E. The Berliet PCM series of buses had 4 major variants on which the double-decker was based, and was supposed to usher in a new generation of buses in the 1960s. But it was beaten by the SC10 from Saviem and remains a bitter failure for the Lyon manufacturer. The PCM's body was designed by the famed French industrial designer Philippe Charbonneau. Its boxy-like body with a curved windshield did appear somewhat utilitarian and uninspiring, but today is considered an iconic vintage French design. For Berliet, the conclusion was that the PCM could not compete with the much more successful Saviem SC10, and production ended in 1971. The double-decker PCMR-E was sort of known as a face-saving measure, a bus that had to be built, but had no future. Now, let's take a look at some of the basic specifications of the PCMR-E double-decker. Number 1, length is 9.825 meters. Number 2, width is 2.5 meters. Number 3, height is 4.35 meters. Number 4, wheelbase is 4.56 meters. Number 5. Weight when empty is 9,800 kilograms. Number 6. Engine is the MAN DO636 HM8U 6-cylinder flatbed diesel with maximum output of 150 horsepower. Number 7. Engine position is longitudinal, straightforward. Number 8. Gearbox is manual or automatic R107. Number 9. Maximum speed is 60 kilometers per hour. And lastly, at number 10, shock absorbers are pneumatic telescopic with a rear stabilizer bar. After its first presentation to the RATP, the prototype double-decker quickly received its first major criticism. Specifically, the ceiling heights were too low and could make the journey unpleasant for its passengers. Its height was 1.89 meters at the bottom deck and only 1.7 meters at the top deck. The bus also had 3 doors, 2 of which were full width, and a noticeably short wheelbase, which was approximately the same as the smaller PGR. But the RATP could hardly have done better, as the market throughout France was too weak for a manufacturer to launch a large study of a completely new type of double-decker bus. However, the tender was enough to launch a full-scale test for a Paris-specific double-decker. There was one prototype, number 2200, built in 1966. 25 production units of the Berliet PCMR-E type then followed in 1968 and were numbered 2201 to 2225 for a total of 26 buses. The prototype was placed into service beginning in August of 1967 on lines 53 and 94, and the Berliet PCMR-E quickly received a good reception from its patrons, but probably more out of curiosity than anything else at first. But very quickly, the RATP noticed that the upper deck of the Berliet PCMR-E was less and less occupied, and for a simple reason. Passengers who take the bus for medium distances prefer to stay on the lower level and thus save themselves from climbing a few steps. This was a similar situation to that of the Fiat 412-1 Airfer VE.111 Metropole double-deckers being used in Rome and several other cities in Italy that went into service a few years before the Berliets. However, the Fiats fared only slightly better, with a fleet of 58 serving Rome, and the double-deckers were not repeated there. Originally, the PCMR-E was initially operated with a driver and conductor. The RATP modified the buses during the summer of 1972 to be operated with only a driver, and in doing so, closed off the rear door. The Berliet double-deckers continued their career on the streets of Paris until 1977, when they were retired from service. The idea of the double-decker bus in Paris sounded good on paper, but the practice, in reality, turned out to be quite different. And that's why London-style double-deckers didn't catch on in Paris. And if you really like the PCMR-E Paris double-decker, Hachette produced a very collectible 1/43rd scale model of this unique bus. So there it is, the story of the Berliet PCMR-E and why Paris does not have any double-decker transport buses. Now, I believe that there's at least one of these buses that still does exist at the Paris Transport Museum, but I've seen pictures of a few others, and I read that I think one was destroyed about 10 years ago. So if you know exactly how many of these buses still exist, let us know, because only 26 were built. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this look at the Berliet PCMR-E double-decker. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and Have a great day. Bye.